Susan from Sunrise Quilt Studio, and today I'm starting a new project. I'm going to work on this quilt here behind me. This is a vintage Drunkard's Path. It's got fabrics in it from the 30s, maybe some in the 40s, and it's a small Drunkard's Path pattern. And I haven't decided quite what I'm going to quilt on it, so this will just kind of be a let's try out a couple of designs and see what happens. Now this is a good quilt for an overall pattern. You could do an edge-to-edge pantograph type design or a freehand overall, because it's just a simple design that's repeated over and over again, so that would be really good for an overall. But I personally don't like to do pantographs because I like to be at the front of the machine. And my machine is older and all pantographs have to be done from the back, so I can't really see what I'm doing from the back. So I prefer not to do that. So I'm going to do something custom. I haven't quite decided what. I was playing around yesterday with a couple of design ideas, and I think I'm just going to go ahead and put this on the machine and then show you a couple of ideas as it's on the machine. And then I'm going to just quilt it. So up next will be a couple of design ideas, and then I'll start the quilting. Okay, I wanted to go ahead and show you, I think there's 3 designs that I'm considering for this top. And I decided to go ahead and throw this top over my ironing board and put some plastic over the top of it so I can show you. Because if I did this on the machine, I'd be using white chalk and you wouldn't be able to see that very well. So we're going to go ahead and use the dry erase marker. One of the things I was considering, since this is a traditional pattern and it's a vintage top, was to do something more traditional on it. And if you notice this pattern that they made with the Drunkard's Path block, like this is one little block. This is a Drunkard's Path block, just this little piece here. And they put 4 of them together to make this one patch. And so this is a 4-patch block, like this. And it's 8 inches finished, so each section is 4 inches. And what I was thinking of doing was doing a scallop design, and that would be going from using 2 units to make an arc, and then on the row below I'm going to stagger this by 1 section. So I would start in the middle of this one and come down. Now my little 4-inch template is just the right size, so I could choose to follow my template or I could freehand this. Either way, it depends on how precise I want this to look. If I want this to look extremely professional, very precise, I would use my template. If I want this to look more kind of homespun and purely hand or hand guided, it's not hand stitched, but it's hand guided, then I would eliminate that. It also goes faster. So this is one design that I am considering. This will, I think this will be plenty of quilting. It would be kind of missing some of all of these little intersections. There's a lot of intersections in the piecing, and I think that would be helpful. So the only thing that's holding me back is this is kind of a directional design. So if this was on this is more like a twin size quilt. If it was a bigger quilt and I was considering putting it on my queen size bed, this quilt can only lay one direction because of the quilting in it. If I care about that, and quite frankly that wouldn't bother me personally, but it would some people. And so that's one thing to consider, is if you have a directional quilting design, how is this quilt going to lay on your bed? Even though this pattern is not directional by any means, the quilting would make the overall quilt directional. So that's one thing you have to consider. You could do something like a Baptist fan. Now that's not something I want to try on this quilt, but that is a traditional design that would look good. You could also do the outline piecing on this, and I wouldn't do I wouldn't outline each individual piece, but I would probably do something like this. And then go over to that next section. What that does, though, is that's going to leave a lot of your top unquilted. See, all of this would be unquilted. This would be quilted, but all this would be left open. So you could also maybe crosshatch. You could do that throughout the whole quilt, and that would look kind of like this. You would just have that design over the whole quilt. And instead of this, this is going right through the middle of the block, but if I was going to do this, of course I would make it, I would do this. And I think I would work like two rows at a time, go to the end, stitch in the ditch on the outside in the seam line, and then come back and then do this row. If I don't lose my way like I just did. Then come back down and go across. So that is also a traditional way to finish this top. And if I decided to do something modern, I wouldn't do anything too tightly quilted in here. I wouldn't do feathers. I wouldn't do tight swirls. What I would do is look at each individual block, and I would choose one of two designs for this one. But you see me do this design quite a bit. I'm just going to divide the piecing into quadrants and the quilting. And we'd have that design. And then this design is fairly similar, except in this section I'm going to do a heart. Just like this. There we go. So I haven't decided yet what I want to do. I haven't decided if I want to go traditional or if I want to go to one of these directions. Right off the bat, between these two designs, I think I would choose this one. Between the crosshatch and the scallops, I don't know. I'm not sure which one I would choose. So I'm going to go ahead and put this on the machine, and maybe that'll kind of help spark some inspiration. And as soon as I get that on the machine, I'll show you the quilting. Okay, here I'm going to show you how I'm quilting in this background section of the quilt. Now with these blocks that are set side by side, they form a secondary pattern, and that makes this background section here. So I decided to just echo this with a 1/4 inch spacing between all the lines of quilting, like you would a Greek key. And what that does is flattens down that background, and it accentuates that design also, so that secondary design does show up. And then I go down and start working on the pattern fabric in this block. Now doing this one section at a time meant there was a lot of stopping and starting and breaking thread, and it just takes a lot of time. So I did come up with another way to do this where I didn't have to stop and start so much, and I will show you that in the next scene. But here you can see for this part that I am just outline quilting the design. I'm just following the edge of the printed fabric with about a 1/4 inch stitching line there. And some of these blocks had a little fullness in it, so I did have to manipulate that fabric with my fingers to keep it from puckering and pleating on me. So you see that didn't take very long, but that is just, you know, one section of the background. There are, you know, 4 sections surrounding that. So overall, this was a little bit time consuming, but I did like the outcome, so I was happy with it. And now here you can see I'm going across the row and manipulating that fabric to keep from having some puckers. And I'm just going from one block to the next, and I'm only quilting in the bottom section of the block here in the printed fabrics. And you can see right there I just slid right over to the next block. And I am in stitch regulated mode, so I can pause and stop whenever I need to manipulate fabric or to just guide the machine a little closer to the edge, whatever I need to do to get the pattern to come out the way I want it to. And I did use the same color thread throughout. That's just an off-white fabric or off-white thread, and I don't really remember the name of it, but it was by YLI. It may have been vanilla, but I don't remember anymore because I did do this a little while ago. So now I went across the top of that block, and now I'm coming down the left side, and then I'm just going to scoot right on over to the next block and then work my way up the right side of that block, and then across the top, and then across the left side, and then on to the next block. So what I did for all of these rows is I did that section first, and then I went back through and did the background sections of the quilt, the off-white background sections. Now here's a closer shot of the quilting that I'm doing as I'm working from one block to the next, and I'm working on the bottom section of the block first, and then going on to the next block and doing the bottom of that one. And here I'm just going to show you 2 of the blocks. I'm going to work this as if it's the entire row. So I'm just going to go through 2 blocks and come on up the right side of the second block, then across the top, and then down the left side. So you get a better idea of what I'm doing. And you can see I'm having to manipulate the fabric a little bit to keep puckers out of it. But this quilt actually wasn't in too bad a shape as far as it being out of square. It wasn't too bad at all. Just a few little sections like that I had to kind of watch. And this one was all hand pieced, so it was actually in pretty good shape for a quilt that was hand pieced. A lot of times I find that the hand pieced quilts are more out of square than a machine pieced quilt will be. So now I'm working on the top of the second, or actually this was the first block, and just finishing up. And almost done. And there it is. Now in the next view I'll show you how I went from block to block when I was quilting the background. Okay, I'm going to start over again here with pulling up my bobbin thread and securing my stitches. And this is like the half section of the background here, so I'm just going to quilt that in real quickly, and then I'm going to follow that middle seam and go on through the center of that block to get to the next section that has the background quilting, and then I'm going to do the echo quilting in that entire section there. So this goes really quick. I'm just using my hopping foot as a guide for the distance between the lines of quilting, and just getting it done pretty quick, and then sliding on over to the next section. and that's how I did those sections all in a row, do a complete row at one time. Had to do 2 passes with doing the background in one pass and the printed fabric in another pass, but that was a way to keep from having to break thread every time I switched from one section to the next. And here is the completed quilt, and you can see how the background is, you could see the quilting in it, you could see the pattern, and yet the piecing with the printed fabric is showing real well. It's the showpiece of the quilt, so it is looking nice and crisp, and I think it just turned out pretty well. There were a lot of different fabrics in this quilt. This turned out to be a really good project. This is one I was happy that I bought. Thanks for watching. For more quilting ideas, click on the video links. And to keep up with my newest projects, click on the subscribe button. I hope to see you again soon.